The exciting part of the evening is here. We've got Pack Preach. So we've got 3 people delivering 9 minutes on a question about Jesus. So they've been able to choose one. You're going to hear their different stories. And the most important thing is that we support them as a church. These guys have really worked on what to say. And so we're going to be supportive of them, right? Okay, you can get louder as we go along. Let me get the microphone for them. But we want a loud cheer each time they come up.
So, when I was originally asked to write this talk, I put it off for a very, very long time. I knew I wanted to talk about worry because it's something that I personally struggle with. And it's really easy to trivialize a talk like this about worry. And I really wanted to get God's perspective on it for myself. So I hope that it's also helpful for you. The brief provided in the email for this talk had a list of questions that Jesus asked across his life. So this served for me as a natural launching off point to talk about worry. The verse I chose was Matthew 6:27, which should be up there, yeah, which says, "Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life?" Now, I'm going to be completely transparent about this Bible verse. I think this is the most frustrating verse in the Bible. Basically being like, just don't worry, just don't worry. This is because worry often, for me, feels like a perpetual cascade of thoughts and feelings. And so I'm like, if I could stop worrying, I would. A personal example from my own life, a quick flashback to 3 years ago when I was in lower sixth form. I thought I had a really clear plan for my future and how it was going to play out. I was going to go to uni for academic music. I was going to do my 3-year course. I was going to teach music. And then probably join an orchestra after that. And I thought I had it all planned out. And then this tiny thing called a global pandemic happened. And it felt like nothing was certain for anyone, essentially. And at the precipice of like the most pivotal period of my life, it felt like, I really wasn't certain I wanted to do academic music at all. So I applied for music performance instead and applied for theology. And basically went, just Lord help me. And I was super worried. And I think during the duration of those 12 or so months, all I could think about was, what if none of this happens and I go nowhere? Now, at the time, I thought I was being really socially aware. I thought I was just analyzing data and playing the situation out. But in retrospect, I was caught in a cycle of worry. The difference between worry and social awareness that Jesus is talking about in Matthew is worry doesn't want to engage in change. It finds comfort in itself. And here's what I mean. Worry doesn't want to do anything useful with the information, even though it pretends to. As uncomfortable as the feeling is, that constant feedback loop is predictable enough of a pattern for our brains to latch onto. So say you're faced with some uncertainty concerning your past or your future. Instead of finding a resolution, your brain does the next best thing. It establishes familiarity. It's like a fire alarm that once you've heard it long enough and enough times, you become desensitized to it or even comforted by it. William Barclay, who's a theologian, puts it this way. Worry refuses to learn the lesson of life. The lesson of life is that somehow we have been enabled to bear the unbearable and to do the undoable and pass the breaking point and not to break. Essentially, what Barclay is advocating for here is the resilience of the human spirit when we're in relationship with God. We're more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. So what worry does is discredit that resilience and discredit our options, ultimately. We think worrying is clarifying our judgment when it's impairing it. Now, this is the point in the talk where normally people go, and you know what the answer is to all of this? Jesus! And as a cynic myself a bit, I'm like, really? Your conclusion is Jesus is the answer? Because we kind of expect from God like this supernatural resolution of thunder and lightning, and idealize that God will just magic away our worries. And in all of this, we forget that faith in and of itself is supernatural. Our faith in what a man did on our behalf at the hand of Roman rule 2,000 years ago is supernatural. And what's even more supernatural is that this man shares in the identity of the God of the universe and is one that we can have a relationship with. So what's the antidote to worry? Well, it's a relationship with God. For people who are cynical like I am, even establishing a pattern where you bring your worries to God is better than worrying in silence and pretending that nothing is happening. If you're worried about something, tell a friend or ask for prayer. All of these things are practical things we can do before we even talk about the power of prayer. We can find rest, peace, and comfort in God and know that we have the space to talk to him and even rage at him with our worries and promise. And he promises to meet us there. God isn't some moral algorithm that just regurgitates data and divine judgment. When you bring your worries to him, you are talking with the living God, a God who created you for relationship with him. The one you can bring worries to, be them money-related, degree-related. If you're a student or a graduate, if you're worried about the next step in life, friendship, health, it doesn't really matter. It goes without saying that the world for the past 3 years for all of us has been surrounded by uncertainty. And so praying for our world can sometimes feel like a drop in the ocean. But this again is the supernatural nature of faith, that as Christians, we have the power to intercede on behalf of our world and the systems that animate our reality. We're in relationship with a God of the above and beyond, but also a God of friendship, a God that gives life and a God that is hope. And we get to choose that focus of hope in the face of a broken world through our relationship with God. So will I worry in the future? Probably. But if I mean we, can develop a habit of being aware of God when we begin to worry, then we'll move the needle a step from where it was before. And that's progress in our relationship with God. Not because we're right, not because we're good, but just because we showed up. Bringing our worries to God might not kill worrying forever, but it certainly gives God's voice a bigger seat at the table. Sometimes our relationship with God feels like a whiplash of the zeal of an early relationship that's fun and exciting, but ultimately it's that slow burn of commitment to each other that is both the simplest, the most challenging, and most rewarding part of our relationship with God in the long run. So to answer worry is just showing up. The answer to worry, rather, is to show up with God. 1 Peter 5 puts it perfectly: cast your cares, because he cares about you. You don't have to do or be anything to be good enough. He cares about you and he loves you as you are.
Hello. I'm going to talk on a really similar verse, which is fun, I think. Maybe God thinks we need to hear some things twice this evening. But the verse I'm going to speak on is from Luke 12, verse 26. And it says, "If even the smallest things are beyond your control, why are you anxious about the rest?" And I actually picked it for a really similar reason. I picked it because it's one of the verses in the Bible that does my head in. Specifically, when I try to talk to people about things that are stressing me out, and I'm asked the question, "Why are you anxious, Jesus?" I often find that people jump to that rather than giving time and space for me to talk about what's going on. I also find that often the undertone of it is, "Hey Beck, if you're worried, that means you don't have enough faith. And if you don't have enough faith, then you're probably backsliding." So it sits slightly uncomfortably with me. And by extension, it plays into one of my pet peeves with the church. And if you know me, you'll know I have a few. But this pet peeve is the way that we tend to talk about mental health in the church. We tend to rush to the answer that is Jesus, without giving people time and space to process what they're going through. Why is that important? Well, for loads of reasons. Not least because I work for the NHS as a mental health professional, and I just think we need more time and space to talk about mental health. But also because today, right now, it's estimated that like 30 to 36% of all humans are experiencing anxiety. And when we look around the world, it's pretty clear why. It's a tricky place to be living and a tricky time to be living. But this is the verse that kept jumping out at me to talk about. So we're going to quickly think about context, and then I want to share 2 quick reflections. So context, Jesus has drawn a crowd, as he often did. He's criticised the religious leaders for everything, their hypocrisy, their religious rules, putting barriers between Jesus' people and Jesus. Then we get the parable of the rich fool, where he says, you're a fool to store up earthly wealth but not have a relationship with me. And then he talks about birds and flowers and the fact that they don't do anything and God looks out for them. And then he asks us this question. If even the smallest things are beyond your control, why are you anxious about the rest? And the two things that stuck out at me when I was thinking about this were first the nature of God, and second the humanity of Christ. So let's go one at a time. The nature of God. God has many names. The great I am, the Alpha and Omega, the Prince of Peace, the Provider. And for me, that's what the heart of this passage is about. It's about God's provision, God's faithfulness, the fact that they come through time and time again, sometimes clearly, sometimes blatantly, sometimes by slapping you in the face and saying, I'm still here, and sometimes under the radar. My word, if I look back over the years, I've had so many times of flapping about like a right silly goose, thinking I was there on my own, but God was quietly working underneath it all. I could share so many testimonies, but today I want to share a really neat, tidy one that basically came with a bow on the top, and actually feels a little bit cringy to talk about. But we're going to move to York, me and Ron, and oh, that was a very mixed reaction. My word, you can all come. It's fine. And one of the big things that I needed to do was get a job, because I can't just work from home. And I saw a job that I thought was really exciting, but it was to start immediately, and it was to start at a band lower than I needed it to be to pay the bills. But it felt right, so I applied for it, I got an interview, and I prayed, God, whatever happens, give me peace in this situation. I did the interview, and half an hour later, I got a phone call offering me the job. Yeah, that was nice. That's my wife, by the way. Big fan. But in the phone call, they said, and actually, you can start whenever you want. We know you've got some things to tie up. And also, this is really weird, and I don't know why it's just come to me, but there's a Band 6 job going, and we just wondered whether you might want to apply for it. Neat, tidy, bit of a bow on the top. God provides, as I say, sometimes like a slap in the face. I'm still here. The second thing I want to talk about is the humanity of Christ. Because as I talked about earlier, sometimes we jump the gun. We tell people to trust in God straight away, and we don't give them time to process what's been going on. But you know who didn't do that? Jesus. Jesus was fully human as well as fully divine. So he got it. He knew what it felt like to be frustrated, to be sad, to be too warm, to be thirsty, to be hungry, to be anxious. Jesus said, come to me, all who are weary. I will give you rest. Jesus said, woman, why are you weeping? And then listened to her answer. Jesus came alongside them on the Emmaus Road and said, tell me what's up. What's going on? Let's chat. When Thomas doubted and said he needed to see the nail marks and the wound in the side, Jesus said, here it is, come at it. Jesus always gave people time and space to talk about their anxieties. So, what I've realized this week, as I've been reflecting on this verse that has really niggled me over the years, is this. It's not a chastisement. It's a reminder of God who provides, and it's an invitation to share the things that are bothering us.
Evening. I'm Lydia. I think I know quite a lot of you, but for those who don't know me, I've been coming to St Mary's for a couple of years now. And just as slightly off script, but I do just feel like I need to share this. When God's on your case, he doesn't let go. When God's got something planned for you, it always comes to fruition, no matter how long it takes, no matter how far you try to go from it, it always comes through. And actually being up here is part of that journey for me. Speaking to people is definitely something that God has always put on my heart, and is really a great opportunity that I've been given to do that here. So just want to say, if God's on your case, then it will always come through. Anyway, back to my script. As a day job, I'm an engineer, engineering education person, so I try to make engineering sound cool, so that young people will actually think about it. And then on the side of that, I coach a women's football team. So from Thursday this week and Sundays going forward, I'll probably be grumpy if we lose, so just watch out for that. So my question is Matthew chapter 22, verse 20, verse 32, and Jesus says, "What do you want me to do for you?" So let's just look a bit at the context of this verse. So there were two blind men sitting on the side of the road who call out to Jesus, and Jesus asked them what do they want him to do for them, and their response is they would like their sight, and Jesus heals them. So in this moment, they recognize that they need help, but they also recognize that Jesus is able to help them. Everyone knows the basic aim of football, and actually any sport, is to win. That's the goal at the end of it. In football, you do that by scoring more goals than the other team. And one of the most effective ways is to score, but don't let the other team score. That's it. That's football in a nutshell. So when I'm coaching, I'll say to my defenders, stop letting the other team score. This is a complete instruction. They know what I'm asking them to do. But it's also not very helpful to them. So a lot of the time I'll get something back like, how do I do that? Or something slightly less polite, but the general gist. Then I have to be quite specific with them. So some coaches will go for kick them, pull them back, do any means necessary, take the foul, whatever else. But I go for talking them through everything from timing, body position, general position on the pitch, all of those things that will be helpful. And then it's really clear what I'm asking them to do. And I think this is what Jesus is doing with them. He's probably seen them and probably knows what's wrong with them, but he asks quite specifically what they want him to do. And when they shouted, they asked Jesus to have mercy on them. But when they were asked for their specific need, they asked for their sight. So what does this mean for us today? So I've got 3 quick points to go through. So the first one is we need to recognize our limitations and our need for help. So it takes a lot of humility to admit our shortcomings, to recognize our limitations, and to ask for help. This is one thing I am also terrible at. So I spend so much time getting overwhelmed, but never actually stop to actually ask for help. One thing that I'm saying quite a lot at work at the moment is, I just need to get to this point, then I can get somebody else to help. The trouble is, I never get to that point. It's never okay. I'm never happy with it enough to just hand it over. And that it's not a bad thing to ask for help. It's not a bad thing to be able to not do everything ourselves. And it's really not a bad thing to ask Jesus for help. And the second point is, we must boldly approach Jesus. So the blind men were bold and loud. They had to shout out and call out to Jesus. And they knew what he could do for them, so they were not ashamed to call out to him. We should approach Jesus with this same confidence and faith. We don't even have to shout to him. We can if we want to, but he's with us, so we can just whisper what we need as well. But we can ask boldly, knowing he's always ready to hear our prayers and answer our needs. We should never hesitate to bring our concerns, doubts, worries, desires, and fears before him. And the third one is, we can express our desires. So I think sometimes when we pray, we kind of tell God what the matter is, but we often miss out the detail of what we actually want him to do for us. For me at the moment, I'm praying for something, and I find myself asking God for a breakthrough. So I'm like, God, I really need a breakthrough in this. But what I really want is a resolution. What I really want is a restoration of relationships. But I guess I've not been bold enough to use that language yet. And there really is nothing wrong with being direct. It's not cheeky. It's not a cheeky ask. It's not too much for him. And it's not like he can't help. So you really can ask what you need. Of course, we don't know what the answer will be, but we must trust in his sovereignty, believing that he knows what's best for us. Even if his answer to our prayers is different to what we expect, we can have the confidence that his plan is perfect. And we should align our desires with his will and have faith that he will work all things out together for our good. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16 says, "Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." So Jesus asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" So let's be real, let's be bold, and let's be specific with Jesus.